así espero tu regreso a la tierra del olvido.
Como naufragan mis miedos, si navego en tu mirada, como alerta mi sentido, con tu voz enamorada, con tu sonrisa de niña, como me mueves el alma, como me quitas el sueño, como me robas la calma. Como la luna que alumbra por la noche los caminos, como las hojas al viento, como el sol espanta el frío, como la tierra la lluvia, como el mar espera el río, así espero tu regreso a la tierra del olvido.
All animals were a source of inspiration to my father. Through the joy of his storytelling, throughout the years, I bonded deeply with Papa, and that brought out the best in both of us. One of my father's favourite animals was Timbre, the horse that on more than one occasion saved his life. In 1938, it had been necessary to open one of the first roads through the savannah of the Llanos Orientales of Colombia. My father received an offer to be involved in this important job, to oversee the crew of workers and to assist and treat them in the case of injuries or attacks from animals. Papa was very brave, and his profession as a pharmacist had given him the knowledge to do the work. At that time, this immense territory was packed with fierce animals like the jaguar, different kinds of birds, parrots, monkeys, deadly snakes, as well as the endemic illness, malaria. No doctor in the country had dared to take this job as it was just too dangerous. With an open mind and well prepared with medicines and first aid, he was ready to enter this mysterious new territory. As soon as he saw the river, my father's eyes were watering with happiness. The immensity of the river was like the sea, but with sweeter water. Overwhelmed by the turbulent waters, he was shivering with respect and awe as he thought about the secrets of the jungle. In the nearest town, he bought a horse and a few provisions. The most important things for him to carry were the medicines. He began administering vaccinations, even though some workers were reluctant to have them. Then they were ready to enter the unknown. The whole of the first week, the workers cut grass and bushes until they had cleared a spot for their camp. Everything was very basic. Their tents were made of thick canvas covering a wigwam of tree branches. A couple of workers were in charge of the axes and sickles. The rest of the crew kept their own machetes close at hand. The day started at 4 a.m. While it was still dark, the men lit the fire to boil water and make coffee, dipping cassava bread in the precious liquid. All the while they were deep in thought, hoping that in the near future there would be a change to the atrocious weather. The foreman had warned the crew of dangerous things ahead, and therefore to be on their guard. Jaguars had been seen to prey on the cattle in the area, but they also needed to keep a lookout for the horses and for themselves. Dawn broke with an amazing sunrise. Its reflection over the river was long and golden, and the sky was bathed in red. Everybody stood for a minute or two to salute this marvel, and then carried on working until midday, when the men had their portion of dried meat, cassava and coffee. They took as much water from the river as they wanted. By 1 o'clock, the sun was burning hot, but the men were again at work. Their labours finished at 4 p.m, so that they could have some free time. They enjoyed bathing by the river bank, but it was very tempting to swim further out into the water. However, no one dared to do so because the river, albeit beautiful, was full of piranhas. The light over the savannah was fading by 6 p.m, and the men sat around the fire having soup. As was the custom, their evening meal was different to their lunch. They ate something hot, more cassava and a wild animal boiled in a pot. The meal was missing vegetables as they did not grow in this region. They played cards and drank palm rum. It was the only entertainment they had. The pitch black drove them to bed as they listened to the ever-present noises of the jungle. The first month had gone by, and until now no serious illness had affected the workers. My father was keeping a permanent eye on them, and by then they knew each other quite well. The indigenous Guayabero Indians had been nomadic before the Spanish colonization, but they were forced to settle in small communities and trade by the river with other people living alongside the river. From time to time they appeared unexpectedly and provided the men with papayas, pineapples, bananas, eggs and other goods. The men were happy when in the distance they caught sight of their canoes. Papa always thought the Indians knew the river like the backs of their hands, and they were the salt of the earth. On the savannah, the ranchers lived a tough life, and they had nerves of steel. They protected their cattle quite well, but of course the tiger also needed to eat. Many times my father saw the tiger being hunted and skinned of its precious coat. Also, many times a cow was preyed upon during the night. The rancher would mourn the death of his animal and performed a special prayer to deter the jaguar from returning. Year by year, during the winter season, the torrential rain flooded the savannah, and Los Caños, that's the formations of natural pools, were transformed into a big river, which made it impossible for the work to carry on to open the road. Then everybody would take refuge in the ranches, and the herds of cattle vanished to the faraway mountains. You couldn't see the grass or bushes, only the tips of the trees, and now and then the migratory birds resting on top of them. The immensity of the waters made the days long, and the people were becoming lethargic, even though they managed to create music and made harps, cuatros, that's 4-stringed instruments, and maracas, the instruments of the region. If the quality of these instruments was good, then they could be sold at the next festival for a good price. Papa was good with words, poetry, and wit, which he put to music. After 2 months, the rain started to ease off, and the rivers receded to their original size. Then the cattle slowly came down to graze on the freshly grown pastures of the savannah. The birds were pleased and attached themselves like ornaments to the backs of cows to clean them. The ranchers were counting the cattle they had branded the previous spring. Very soon, the work would continue on the road, and the lazy mornings would come to an end. New supplies of medicines were needed, and my father sent Carlos, his best and most trustworthy man, to the nearest town. It could take him a week to come back, taking into account the extra difficulties on the road. In the week that everybody thought was the last of the rains and hopes for sunshine were high, a torrential downpour caught the men in the middle of the roadworks. The sky suddenly went black, and thunder and lightning frightened them all. There wasn't time to go back to the camp. In a moment of inspiration, my father threw his bayeton, that's a big waterproof poncho, on top of his horse. It looked like a tent, and he hid himself under the belly of Timbre, his horse, to protect himself. For many hours, the only noise was the implacable rain, and with the exhaling sound of the horse, Papa slept. Eventually, everything was calm, and the men were soaked to the skin when they found out that one of the workers had been killed by a bolt of lightning. Many days passed in mourning, and by night the stars were the company for the living and the dead. When Carlos swung down from his horse, exhausted, he caused elation amongst the men when he handed out some tobacco. Papa was very content with the new medicines and the vitamin supplements that he had asked for. As it was so important for my father to keep the workers as healthy as he could, that very same night the men were injected with a variety of vitamins. The beautiful landscape was dreamlike, the herd grazing and the horses galloping with their manes flowing in the wind was pure poetry. New flocks of birds came by. The trees were covered with parrots in their thousands. The macaws, peccaries, armadillos, and monkeys came out from their hiding places. With the overwhelming buzzing of the insects, all beings were celebrating the new spring.